The morning air in Seoul was crisp, one of those early spring mornings when the mist still lingered low, curling like unspoken words around the narrow streets. The city was already awake, impatient and electric, humming with a rhythm Stella Johnson was still learning to understand. She hurried along the cobbled street leading to Café Dewa, clutching her worn leather bag against her chest. Her shift began at 7 sharp, and though she had been in Korea for nearly a year, punctuality still felt like a race she was always one step behind in. The cafe's owner, Mrs. Park, was kind but watchful, a woman who spoke little but saw everything. The bell above the cafe door chimed as Stella entered, brushing the cold off her jacket. She tied her apron, tucked away her braids, and greeted the few early customers with her soft Nigerian accent that always seemed to make them smile. Behind the counter, she began brewing coffee, the aroma of roasted beans filling the air, when she noticed a man seated by the window, half hidden behind the morning paper. His suit was immaculate, his hair neatly combed, his wristwatch gleaming faintly under the golden light. Everything about him was measured, precise, restrained. He had been there before 3 times, she recalled. He always ordered black coffee, no sugar. He never stayed long, never smiled. As she approached his table, her eyes caught the faint crease between his brows, the kind that didn't come from anger, but from habit. He was reading, yet his mind seemed elsewhere. "Good morning, sir," she said, setting down his coffee. He looked up briefly. His eyes were dark, unreadable, the kind that held silence like a secret. "Thank you," he murmured. His voice was calm, low, carrying a quiet authority. Stella returned behind the counter, but her eyes lingered a moment longer. She didn't know his name then, not yet, but something about him drew her curiosity. It was later, after the rush hour had passed and the cafe emptied, that she noticed it, a black leather briefcase left under his table. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around. The man, the stranger in the fine suit, was gone. Only the faint scent of cologne remained, mixed with coffee and rain. "Mrs. Park," she called softly. "Someone forgot this." Mrs. Park came over, adjusted her glasses, and frowned. "Ah, that man. He comes sometimes. Very quiet. Always alone. What should I do with it? Maybe open, see if there's a name." Stella hesitated but nodded. She unlatched the briefcase carefully. Inside were files, thick, neatly arranged, labeled in Korean. On top lay a passport and a business card. She turned it over and read aloud. "Kang Jae-Hyun, CEO, JH Corporation." Her breath caught. She had seen that name before, printed in newspapers her classmates read in the university library. JH Corporation was one of Seoul's rising companies, making waves in finance and technology. "This must be important," she said. Mrs. Park nodded. "Better call. There's a number." But Stella knew enough Korean to understand that calling the CEO of a major company would not be simple. Instead, she decided to take it there herself after work. By noon, the rain had started again, soft, silvery, unending. She closed her umbrella as she entered the marble lobby of JH Corporation, dwarfed by the glass towers above. The receptionist looked up with polite suspicion. "Yes, miss? Do you have an appointment?" "I know," Stella began nervously. "Someone left this at the cafe, where I work. Mr. Kang Jae-Hyun." It seemed important. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Please wait." Moments later, a tall man in a dark suit approached. His presence carried the same quiet authority as the man in the cafe, because it was him. He looked at her with surprise that quickly faded into composure. "You," he said simply. "Yes," she replied, a little breathless. "You left this." She held out the briefcase. For a moment he said nothing. His gaze softened, but only slightly. "You could have just called. I thought it might be safer to bring it myself." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first sign of warmth she had seen. "You might have saved me more than you know," he said quietly, taking the briefcase. "There are documents here worth more than my sleep." Stella smiled shyly. "Then I suppose you owe me a coffee." He looked at her, almost amused, but the expression faded as quickly as it came. Perhaps, he said, and turned away. But as he walked toward the elevator, he paused. What's your name? Stella Johnson. He repeated it slowly, as though testing the sound. Thank you, Miss Johnson. The elevator doors closed, leaving her alone in the marble silence. She turned to leave, unaware that from the 30th floor above, Kang Jae-Hyun stood by the glass window, watching her cross the street under her small blue umbrella, and for the first time in years, wondered what it might feel like to stop being alone. The following morning dawned with a brittle light that crept through the towers of Gangnam and spilled across the polished floors of JH Corporation. Inside the 32nd floor boardroom, voices murmured in low urgency, screens glowed with figures that refused to balance. A contract with a foreign investor, one that could either make or unmake the company, was due for signing before noon. Kang Jae-Hyun sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone. He listened, but the words of his legal director floated past him like smoke. His mind replayed yesterday's moment at the cafe, a young woman standing under a blue umbrella, holding out the briefcase he had forgotten. If not for her, those documents, proof of patent ownership, would have been lost in the shuffle of Seoul's morning rain. He exhaled slowly, pressing a hand against his temple. Mr. Choi, he said at last, his voice level. Confirm that the signed annex is intact. Mr. Choi flipped through the folder. Yes, sir. It was placed inside the briefcase you recovered yesterday. A faint murmur rippled through the room. The CFO leaned forward. We would have been in violation without that annex. The investors would have withdrawn. Jae-Hyun's eyes flickered toward the window where sunlight shimmered against the glass. Then we owe our fortune, he said quietly, to a stranger who serves coffee. The words hung in the air. For a man known to speak only in numbers and directives, the softness in his tone startled them. By afternoon the deal was sealed, signatures laid down in decisive strokes. The company's crisis dissolved into celebration. Yet, while others toasted with champagne, Jae-Hyun stood apart, staring at the city skyline. His reflection in the window looked distant, like a man haunted by something he could not define. That evening, as twilight gathered over Seoul, he found himself again before the familiar facade of Café Daewoo. Through the window he saw Stella wiping down tables, her movements unhurried, her face calm in the warm light. He hesitated before pushing the door open. The bell chimed. She looked up. Oh, Mr. Kang, she said, her surprise tempered by a shy smile. You came back. I did. He removed his gloves and looked around awkwardly, as though unused to such ordinary places. I thought I should thank you properly. There's really no need. Anyone would have done the same. No, he replied, settling into a seat. Not everyone would have. She brought him his usual black coffee and sat across from him at his gesture. For a moment neither spoke. The cafe was nearly empty, the hum of the espresso machine filling the silence. I heard, Stella said softly, your company was signing something important today. He raised an eyebrow. You follow business news? I study business management. It's hard not to. A small laugh escaped her. Though I don't exactly belong to your world. He studied her, her hands still bearing faint marks of long hours, the weary determination in her eyes. You belong to any world you choose to enter, he said at last. Her laughter faltered. That's kind of you to say, but Seoul doesn't make it easy. He leaned back, thoughtful. You work mornings and attend classes? Yes. It's the only way I can stay here. Something in her honesty disarmed him. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a card, and slid it across the table. Come to this address tomorrow, he said. My office. I may have a position that suits your hours better. She blinked. A job? But why? Because gratitude, he said, should be expressed in action. The following morning, the lobby of JH Corporation felt even more immense than it had the week before. Stella paused just inside the glass doors, momentarily dwarfed by the sweep of marble and chrome. She wore her one formal blouse, pale blue, neatly ironed, and clutched a folder of certificates that suddenly seemed too small a credential for such a place. The receptionist looked up, polite but uncertain. Can I help you? Stella straightened. My name is Stella Johnson. Mr. Kang asked me to come. The woman's brows rose a fraction before she picked up the phone. After a short exchange in rapid Korean, she said, "Please wait. Someone will escort you." Moments later, a young man appeared, tall, impeccably dressed, his hair swept back with deliberate precision. "I'm Han Soo-min," he said in English smooth as glass. "Executive assistant to the CEO. This way, Miss Johnson." His tone carried neither warmth nor hostility, merely curiosity. Yet, as they stepped into the elevator, Stella felt the unspoken question in his silence. "Why you?" They reached the 30th floor. The doors opened onto a world of glass partitions and muted voices. At the far end, Jae-Hyun stood by his desk, sleeves rolled, reviewing documents. He looked up when they entered. "Miss Johnson," he said, motioning toward a seat. "You came?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He turned to Soo-min. "Prepare the orientation package." Soo-min hesitated. "For which department?" "Public relations," Jae-Hyun said, without looking up. "Her English will be useful." The assistant nodded, though his expression darkened almost imperceptibly. When he left, the office felt strangely still. Jae-Hyun set down his pen. "It isn't glamorous work," he said. "Mostly translation, correspondence, a little scheduling. Flexible hours." "That's more than enough," she replied. "Thank you." He studied her for a moment. "You don't have to thank me every time, Miss Johnson. Think of it as mutual convenience." Yet even as he said it, something in his voice betrayed a softer intent. He noticed the way she bit her lip when uncertain, the careful composure masking fatigue. He wondered when he had last spoken this gently to anyone. By noon, Stella was shown to a small desk by the windows. From there she could see half the city, a panorama of steel and cloud. Colleagues passed by with fleeting glances. Whispers trailed behind. A foreign girl in the CEO's department was enough to feed speculation for a week. During lunch break, she ate alone in the canteen, tracing patterns on her cup. A shadow fell across the table. "You'll find this place less intimidating after a few days," Soo-min said, setting down his tray. His smile was courteous, but his eyes measured. "You knew Mr. Kang before?" "Not really. He was a customer at the cafe."
"Ah."
He stirred his coffee slowly. He doesn't usually notice people outside his circle. There was no malice in his tone, only wonder laced with something sharper. "You must have made quite an impression." Stella looked up, meeting his gaze. "I just returned what belonged to him." Soo-min smiled thinly. "Sometimes that's enough to change everything." That evening, after most staff had left, Stella remained to finish a translation. The office lights dimmed. Outside, Seoul glittered like a constellation of restless dreams. Jae-Hyun emerged from his office, jacket in hand, surprised to find her still there. "You're working late," he said. "I wanted to finish this file before tomorrow." He approached the window beside her desk. "The city looks different from up here, doesn't it?" "Yes," she whispered. "From here it feels possible." He turned slightly toward her. "Possible."
"To start over," she said.
"To be more than where you came from." Her words lingered between them like music fading into silence. For a moment he saw not an employee, nor a foreigner, but someone who spoke the same secret language of solitude he had known all his life. When she finally gathered her things, he said quietly, "Be careful on your way home." "I will, Mr. Kang." He nodded, though his gaze followed her until the elevator doors closed. Alone again, he stared at the city lights and realized that gratitude was no longer the only reason he remembered her face. Spring yielded to a brooding summer. The rains came heavier now, drumming against the windows of JH Corporation and washing the city in shifting gray. In the weeks since Stella had joined the company, routine had settled around her like a new skin. The hum of printers, the shuffle of files, the quiet thrill whenever Kang Jae-Hyun passed by her desk and paused to ask a question no one else dared to answer. Her translations were precise, her reports meticulous. Yet it was not her competence that drew attention. It was the ease with which the notoriously distant CEO sometimes spoke to her, his voice unguarded, almost gentle. In a place where silence was hierarchy, kindness became rumor. By mid-June, the whispers began. "Have you noticed?" One clerk murmured by the vending machine. "He takes coffee only if she brings it." Another laughed softly. "Maybe he's learning English in private lessons." Their laughter faded when Sumin walked past, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, but the rumor gnawed at him. For years he had stood beside Jae-Hyun, first as a friend, later as his confidant, building walls to guard a man who trusted no one. Now a foreign girl with tired eyes and stubborn dignity had walked through those walls without effort. That evening, he found Jae-Hyun in the executive lounge, reading over a set of contracts. "She's adjusting well," Sumin said casually. "Yes," Jae-Hyun replied without looking up. "People talk. People always talk." Sumin hesitated. It can become inconvenient. At last, Jae-Hyun raised his eyes. "Then make sure the work we do speaks louder than gossip." His tone ended the conversation, but not the ache behind it. Rain fell again the next morning, soft but relentless. Stella arrived early, soaked despite her umbrella. The building smelled faintly of paper and wet concrete. When she reached her desk, she found a single white envelope lying on top of her keyboard. No name, only the company's seal. Inside, a summons to the CEO's office. Her heart quickened. She knocked, entered, and found Jae-Hyun standing by the window, his reflection lost in the mist beyond the glass. "You wanted to see me, sir?" He turned. "Close the door." She obeyed. "There are rumors," he said quietly, "that our interaction is being misread. I wanted you to hear it from me first." She swallowed. "I've heard them too." He nodded slowly. "If it becomes uncomfortable, I can arrange your transfer." "No," she said quickly. "Please don't. I've worked hard for this position. I can endure a few whispers." He studied her, the firmness in her voice. "You shouldn't have to endure what isn't true." Her gaze met his. "Then let it remain untrue." For a moment the air between them thickened with unspoken things. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city. He took a step closer, then stopped. "You remind me that I am still human," he said at last. "And you remind me," she replied, "that not all walls are made of stone." That night, as Stella left the office, the rain returned in earnest. She crossed the plaza, her umbrella trembling under the wind. A car pulled up beside her, the window lowered. "Get in," Jae-Hyun said. "It's late. I can manage. Please." Something in his tone left no room for argument. She slid into the passenger seat. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and rain. They drove in silence until the traffic thinned. "I used to like the rain," she said at last. "Back home, it meant the earth could breathe again." He smiled faintly. "Here it only reminds people of what they've lost." When he stopped before her small apartment building, she hesitated. "Thank you, Mr. Kang." He looked at her, really looked, and for a heartbeat the air between them seemed to blur. But then he said simply, "Good night, Miss Johnson," and the moment passed. She stepped out into the rain. He waited until she had gone inside before driving away, unaware that from an upstairs window, Han Sumin watched the car's taillights fade into the storm. Autumn came early that year. The air in Seoul turned brittle, the trees along the Han River shedding their leaves like quiet confessions. Inside the polished walls of JH Corporation, time moved differently, faster, heavier, measured in deadlines rather than seasons. For Stella, the weeks since the rainy night had been a delicate balance. Her work had doubled, the whispers had grown quieter, but something unspoken had taken root between her and Jae-Hyun. Every conversation seemed to carry a second meaning. Every glance lingered a little too long. He spoke to her more than to anyone else, yet never of anything personal. But sometimes, when she handed him a document and their fingers brushed, silence spoke for them both. Still, the world outside their fragile bubble waited, watching. One Thursday afternoon, as Stella sorted through reports, the elevator doors opened, and a familiar voice called her name. "Stella." She turned sharply. "Tund." He was the last person she expected to see in this city of strangers, a fellow Nigerian student, one of the few who had known her before Seoul hardened her accent and softened her laughter. "I just got an exchange placement here," he said, his grin easy and familiar. "Business program. Can't believe I'm seeing you in an actual skyscraper." She laughed, the sound rare these days. "You picked the wrong time to visit. I'm drowning in work." "You always were the serious one," he teased. "Still chasing the impossible?" Before she could answer, a shadow crossed the floor. Jae-Hyun emerged from his office, expression unreadable. "Miss Johnson," he said, "is everything all right?" "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. "This is my friend, Tun Databeo. From university." Jae-Hyun extended a polite hand. "Welcome to JH Corporation." Tun shook it, his smile steady. "Thank you, sir." But even as they spoke, Stella felt tension crackle between them. Two men assessing each other without words. After Jae-Hyun returned to his office, Tund leaned closer. "So that's the boss," he whispered. "No wonder people talk." Her eyes flashed. "It's not what you think," he shrugged. "I hope not, for your sake." That evening, as she left the building, Jae-Hyun's car was waiting again. She hesitated before approaching. "You don't have to keep driving me," she said softly as she got in. "I know. Then why?" He glanced at her, eyes unreadable. "Because I want to." For a while neither spoke. The city passed in muted gold and steel. "You shouldn't let your friend visit you at work so freely," he said at last. "People will twist what they see." She turned toward him. "You're worried about rumors or about me?" His fingers tightened briefly on the steering wheel. "Both." "I can handle the first," she said quietly. "I'm not sure about the second." He stopped the car at a red light, his profile carved against the dim glow. "You think I'm protecting you? Aren't you?" "No," he said, voice low. "I'm protecting myself from what I might do if I stopped pretending I don't care." The light changed. The car moved again, but her heart did not. The next day brought chaos. An anonymous email spread through the company, photos of Stella and Jae-Hyun together, edited crudely but convincing enough to sting. Whispers turned to accusations. The board demanded explanations. Jae-Hyun's silence only deepened suspicion. By evening, Stella was called to a disciplinary meeting. Suman sat across from her, papers in hand. "You've caused quite a storm," he said quietly. "I did nothing wrong," she replied. "I believe you," he said. "But others don't. If you leave quietly, it will fade faster." "Leave. It's for your own good." Her voice trembled. "Did you send that email?" Suman looked at her for a long moment. "I protect this company, Miss Johnson. And sometimes, protecting one man means hurting another." Before she could reply, Jae-Hyun entered. His eyes swept the room like a blade. "This meeting is over," he said. "But, sir." "Over," he repeated. When the others left, he turned to Stella. "I'll fix this." She shook her head. "You can't fix perception. I can protect you. And lose everything you've built." He hesitated. "You're worth that." Tears blurred her vision.
"No, Jae-Hyun."
"I'm not." She turned away before he could answer, her footsteps echoing down the corridor like a farewell. The rain came back to Seoul, and with it, a kind of silence that pressed against every window. For days, the city had been gray, the air heavy with rumors that spread faster than the mist. Inside JH Corporation, no one dared to say Stella's name aloud anymore. They whispered instead about the intern, the scandal, and the mysterious disappearance of files that had cost the company a major contract. But Jae-Hyun knew the truth.
He always did.
It began the night after the board meeting. He had called her again, but the line went unanswered. He tried once, twice, then gave up, throwing his phone aside. In the dim of his penthouse office, Jae-Hyun stood before the glass wall, watching the city blur beneath the rain. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about numbers or power. He was thinking about her. The way she said his name, the fire in her eyes, the quiet strength that made her different from every polished executive in his world. And now, that same woman was being torn apart by a lie meant to destroy them both. He turned sharply when the door opened. It was Sumin, calm as always, carrying a folder. "You should rest," Sumin said quietly. Jae-Hyun ignored him. "Who sent those photos?" "Does it matter? The board has made up its mind. The shareholders are nervous. They need someone to blame." He faced him fully. "So they blame her. They blame what she represents: distraction, emotion, loyalty," Jae-Hyun corrected, his voice sharp. "She risked her reputation for this company once before." Sumin sighed. "And maybe that's exactly why she had to go." Their eyes met, one filled with fury, the other with. Meanwhile, Stella stood outside the apartment she could no longer afford. Her suitcase leaned against her leg, her passport in hand. She had written her resignation letter by hand, simple, polite, final. No accusations, no confessions, just a quiet thank you for the opportunity. She told herself it was enough. But it wasn't. The night was too still, the air too cold for peace. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Jae-Hyun, where are you?" Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed, erased, and finally replied. "Stella, please don't look for me. This is better for both of us." She waited, expecting nothing. But a minute later, his reply came. "Jae-Hyun, you think walking away will save me? It's already too late." She swallowed the ache in her throat. The bus arrived. She climbed aboard. Through the window, Seoul blurred into streaks of gold and rain. And still, his words stayed with her. 2 weeks later, an internal audit revealed the truth. The missing contract files had been stolen from Stella's computer, planted by someone with administrative access. And the signature on the digital authorization belonged to none other than Sumin. When the evidence reached Jae-Hyun, his hands trembled for the first time in years. He stormed into Sumin's office. "You did this," he said. Sumin didn't deny it. "You were losing control. She made you weak. She made me human," Jae-Hyun growled. "And you destroyed her for it. You would have thrown away everything for a woman who doesn't belong here." The punch came faster than either of them expected. Sumin fell back, blood at his lip. "Get out," Jae-Hyun said, his voice raw. "Before I forget what friendship once meant." When the door slammed, Jae-Hyun leaned against the desk, breathing hard. He didn't feel victory, only loss. By morning, the company had made an official statement, clearing Stella of all wrongdoing. But she was gone. No one knew where she'd gone, not even her friends from university. Until one day, a familiar name appeared in an unexpected email. From Stella Johnson at Outlook.com. Subject: apology not required. "I heard what happened. You didn't have to do that for me. I've started over. Small cafe in Busan near the coast. It's quiet here. Peaceful. Maybe that's what I needed all along." Jae-Hyun stared at the message for a long time. Then, without a word, he booked a train ticket. The sea breeze smelled of salt and rain when he found her. The cafe was small, painted in soft yellow, with a chalkboard sign that read, "Morning Bloom." She was behind the counter, wiping a cup, her hair tied loosely, no office heels, no corporate stiffness. Just her. When she looked up and saw him, her hand froze. "Jae-Hyun," he smiled faintly. "You still make my name sound like it means something." She exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't be here." "Maybe not," he said. "But I had to see for myself that you were really okay." "I'm learning to be." He stepped closer. "And me?" She hesitated. "You're still the man who taught me how dangerous kindness can be." "And you," he murmured, "are still the woman who taught me how to feel." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said. Finally, she looked away. "You have a company to run. And you have a life to live," he said softly. "But maybe those don't have to be separate anymore." Her eyes met his, cautious, hopeful, afraid. Then she smiled. "Maybe." Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, carrying the last of the storm away. The winter morning unfurled slowly over Busan, a soft haze above the sea, the air cool and salted, as if the ocean itself had paused to breathe. For Stella, Dawn had become ritual. Unlock the cafe, sweep the floor, prepare the beans, and listen to the world before it stirred. Morning Bloom was her new beginning, small, quiet, safe. The sea had replaced the noise of Seoul, yet in its rhythm, she sometimes heard his voice. Jae-Hyun. It had been months since she last saw him standing in that doorway, soaked from the rain, eyes haunted by everything they hadn't said. She told herself she had moved on, that the silence was a mercy. But memory has its own persistence, especially when it comes wrapped in the tone of someone who once looked at you like you were the only person left in a crowded room. It began with an envelope. Simple, white, and tucked beneath the cafe door one morning. Her name written in his careful handwriting, Stella Johnson. Her breath caught. She knew that script too well, deliberate, almost restrained, like the man himself. Inside was a letter, written on thick stationery. I thought I understood loss until you left. But the truth is, loss was never the leaving. It was living each day pretending I had forgotten you. I have stepped away from JH Corporation. It will survive without me, as you once said. I only wish I had your courage sooner. If the sea still calls to you, meet me there, at the pier where the old fishermen mend their nets. 7 p.m., the hour between day and night. Jae-Hyun. Stella folded the letter, pressing it against her chest. For a moment, the quiet cafe seemed to pulse with the heartbeat she had been trying to silence. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. Some stories, no matter how far they drift, are meant to find their way home. At sunset, Busan wore gold. The sea caught the fading light, waves glowing amber as they folded against the shore. Jae-Hyun stood at the edge of the pier, the wind tugging gently at his coat. He looked older somehow, not in years, but in the kind of way that comes from learning to let go of power and rediscover peace. When she appeared at the end of the wooden path, he didn't move. He simply watched, memorizing the way her hair caught the light, the way her steps faltered when she saw him. Stella, he said quietly. Jae-Hyun. He let out a slow breath, half disbelief, half relief. You came. I almost didn't. But you did, he said, stepping closer. And that's all that matters. They stood there, the sea whispering beneath them, the air filled with things words could never hold. I read your letter, she said at last. You left your company. Yes. Why? Because success without peace isn't success at all. I built walls out of ambition, and you were the first to knock on them. I didn't realize how much light you let in until you were gone. She lowered her gaze. You don't owe me this. He smiled faintly. It's not debt, Stella. It's clarity. The wind lifted around them, carrying the scent of salt and rain. I tried to forget you, she said quietly. I tried to believe that what happened between us was only circumstance, gratitude, confusion, timing. But every time I made coffee, I remembered how you took yours strong, no sugar. Every time it rained, I thought of that night on the street. Her voice broke. I thought I left Seoul behind, but I never left you. Jae-Hyun took her hand gently. Do you know what I used to tell myself? She shook her head. That loving you would ruin me. He smiled sadly. And I was right, but it was the best kind of ruin. Tears welled in her eyes. We come from different worlds, Jae-Hyun. We were never supposed to. He placed a finger to her lips, silencing her. Maybe that's what makes it real. We weren't supposed to find each other, but we did. And everything that followed, every mistake, every loss that led us here. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw the man beneath the power, the man who had chosen humanity over empire, the man who had chosen her. Rain began to fall, softly at first, then harder, turning the pier into a sheen of silver. Stella laughed through her tears. It always rains when we meet. He reached out, brushing a drop from her cheek. Maybe it's the sky's way of starting over. They didn't move to shelter. They stood beneath the downpour, faces wet, hearts bared, the city lights flickering behind them. It wasn't grand or loud. It was quiet, human, certain. I don't know where this goes, she said. Then we'll find out together, he answered. She smiled. You really left everything? He nodded. Except one thing. What's that? You. And then, as the storm gathered around them, he pulled her close, not in possession, not in apology, but in peace. The kind of embrace that doesn't demand or promise, only exists. A truth finally spoken. Weeks later, Morning Bloom had a second name beneath its sign, in partnership with JH Foundation. No one in Busan knew what that meant exactly. Only that the woman who ran the cafe and the man who sometimes joined her seemed to carry a quiet joy between them, something unspoken, but understood. On quiet mornings, when the sky was pale and the waves gentle, Stella would brew 2 cups of coffee and carry one to the pier. Sometimes Jae-Hyun joined her. Sometimes he didn't. Either way, she always poured 2. Do you ever miss Seoul? She asked one morning. He smiled. Only the part that led me to you. The wind moved around them, soft and endless. The sea whispered against the shore, repeating the same promise over and over, one they both believed now. Some love stories aren't about forever in time. They're about forever in memory. In the quiet moments. In the way one heart learns to speak in the language of another. And as the waves kissed the sand, Stella closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of salt, coffee, and peace, the truest ending she could have imagined.